Awesome. And welcome to the latest episode of the Winter Garden Yoga Podcast. I'm Brian, the founder and co-owner of Winter Garden Yoga. And I'm really happy to have with us today Timber Hawkeye, who you may have seen on a TEDx talk a few years ago, got over 100,000 views. He's the author of 2 books, Buddhist Boot Camp and Faithfully Religionless. Hopefully I got that right. And before I give away too much, Timber, would you mind just introducing yourself to the folks?
Sure. I am just a regular guy who decided one day to question what I've been told all my life about what success looks like, what happiness looks like. And I was in the middle of chasing what I thought was the American dream, and on the outside looked so successful with the condo and the sports car and the designer clothes and furniture, and thought, what would a different life look like? And so I decided to share my journey as I was stepping away from the conventional into the unconventional. And that's what I'm still doing. So that has not changed in the last 20 years. It's been an interesting journey, and many people have walked beside me on it.
Awesome. In the introduction of your first book, Buddhist Boot Camp, and I don't want to give away too much, but you mentioned that you accepted your robes, your Buddhism robes, after giving up a corporate job and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about what was the corporate job? Was there an epiphany, and how did you earn those robes?
Of course, the intention initially in leaving the corporate world was just to live a simple and uncomplicated life. And I had no idea that it would lead to living in a monastery or taking the monastic vows or anything of the sort. One day at the law firm, one of the other paralegals, which is what I was doing for 10 years, was celebrating her 30-year anniversary. And the fact that she celebrated 30 years in that office, in that cubicle, under fluorescent lights, just terrified me. And I didn't know in that moment what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, but I knew right there and then what I didn't want to do. And it's great for her. I was happy for her. It offered me an opportunity to kind of look into the future and realize this is going to be me if I don't make a change. And so I sold everything I owned. And for me, moving to Hawaii made the most sense, because when I envisioned a simple and uncomplicated life, it involved doing everything I love to do, from hiking to playing volleyball, tennis, going to the beach and whatnot, being able to do it all year round. And in Hawaii, the weather accommodates that. So for me, Oahu specifically made sense because I could live there without a car. You can get around on a bike, you can get around public transportation. It very much accommodates that lifestyle. And I'm not suggesting that everyone, sell everything they own and move to Hawaii. I think the motivation behind all that was just questioning, what is really enough, instead of continually checking, chasing the next paycheck and trying to earn more. I stopped and thought, well, what would be enough? Like, how much not how much can I make, but how little can I get by with? And it turned out that a part-time job was enough. And if we don't ever stop to define what enough looks like, then we'll never have it. So that was the big epiphany. That was the big moment of, what if I, instead of working more, I actually lived more by working less, and just kind of exchange, working full-time and living full-time to living full-time and working part-time. And that translated into moving into it was a progress of first studying with a teacher, Tibetan Lama, and then realizing that on my quest for simple and uncomplicated, Tibetan Buddhism was not the right fit, because it's far from simple and uncomplicated. It's actually quite complex. And I'm really grateful the teacher I had did not try to persuade me to, stick with it and just keep going. And, he was very understanding and said, there are 800 different schools of Buddhism. And if this one's not a right fit for you, because this is not the Buddha's way specifically, it's the Tibetan way to practice the Buddha's way. And if you go to Korea, you'll find a different way. If you go to Thailand, you'll find a different way and whatnot. And he said, from knowing you, what would be a better fit would be Zen Buddhism, which even in itself is broken down into multiple other schools. But the simplicity of it he thought would be very appealing. And at first it was. And true to my form, I don't just pick up a book on Zen Buddhism, I move into a Zen monastery.
Right.
But even there, they discourage you from making the monastery your permanent home. They encourage you to take the lessons you learn and apply them into the life you want to live, not to run away from the life, but to pick up new tools with which to approach it, so to speak. So even the robes made perfect sense living at the monastery, because they were very much in line with what we believed, that everyone at the monastery looked the same. They all had the same haircut. They all, so we were all one, we were all alike. And that was very much in line with what we were being taught and what we believed. It was my own teachers who said, Timber, why the robes? Why can't you just be the guy in town with the bright eyes?
Got you. So not everyone, and I'm going to repeat what you said, and then hopefully we can find maybe stepping stones for folks who feel this way, right? So your message is you don't necessarily have to quit everything and move into a monastery. You don't have to do that. And I think that some folks, as a yoga teacher, I'll talk about meditation. I'll talk about trying to live simply. And a lot of folks think it's just about getting rid of everything, living completely austere, no middle ground, so to speak. So what are some middle ground things where someone maybe can dip their toe in the pool, so to speak?
I think, realizing that, I gave a talk at a dental convention in Connecticut the other week, of all places. And the title for my talk was Stress? What Stress? And many of the people who attended the talk were under the impression that I was going to talk about ways to eliminate stress from your life. And that's not at all what I'm suggesting is the approach that we take, which many people think, like, if I just eliminate the negative people from my life, if I eliminate the stressors from my life, if I eliminate all the annoying people from my, then I'll be at peace. But that's an attempt to control everyone around you, because we're blaming everyone around us and our circumstances for our state of being. Whereas the teachings actually encourage us, not to so much try to create an environment where nobody pushes our buttons, but to get to a place where we don't have any buttons that can be pushed.
Right.
So it's not about moving to a desert island where nobody bothers you. Because if you're the type of person who gets bothered by everything, you will find something on the deserted island that will bother you. Right. The sand is too hot. The ocean water is too salty. There will always be something, because what we essentially are is a pattern of behavior. And, the other day I even posted online saying, if in the same situation, two people can respond to it in two very different ways. And if you're an angry person, you will respond to it angrily. If you're a peaceful person, you will respond to it peacefully. If you're a kind person, you'll respond to it kindly. And many people took that as an opportunity to go, gosh, apparently I'm an angry person, and that's a wonderful realization, because you realize, hey, I have this pattern. And what's that saying? If all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail.
Right.
So if you're the kind of person who responds angrily, or if you're in a stressful situation and you get stressed, if you're surrounded by annoying people, you get annoyed, then you're giving away all your power to other people to make you feel something. And right. Eleanor Roosevelt was the one who said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And I not only agree with her, I believe no one can make you feel anything without your consent. Right. So the starting point, to answer your question, would be realizing that how we feel is a choice. And that to me was extremely liberating, because if I was angry or frustrated or whatnot, I would catch myself and go, why am I choosing anger? There's a gazillion other things I could choose to be feeling right now. Why am I choosing the one thing that is actually detrimental to my own happiness? I'm getting in my own way, and I'm blaming someone else for it, which makes it somehow their responsibility to fix it. And they have no vested interest in fixing your state of mind. They're right. Just going around your life. So I think that would be a really great way to, again, not change your circumstances necessarily, but change the way you look at them. And that may lead to realizing your circumstances are themselves a product of your own thinking pattern. And right. What I mean by that is, when I tell people you don't have to work full time, and they go, well, yeah, I do. I have to pay the mortgage on this big house. I'm like, well, you don't have to live in this big house. And they go, well, yeah, I do, because that's how I can appear successful to other people. And when they go through that questioning of why am I choosing what I'm choosing, they may not like their answer. They may realize they're living their entire life to impress other people, and that may be the trigger to go, I've done it for this long, doesn't work for me anymore. I'm going to start doing something else. And that's the beauty of being patterns of behavior. We can start a new pattern any day. And it doesn't mean, like you said, to go to the other extreme of giving it all up, but it's just like, how can I apply some of this into my existing life with my job, with being in the car and 2 hours on the way to work and back. It's like, can I make that a positive experience as opposed to something I dread every day?
Right. So a couple of things that popped up in my mind was going to a job I hate to earn money, to buy things to impress people I don't even like. Have you heard that one before?
And the Fight Club, and I quote Tyler Durden, who's a fictional character from Fight Club in both of my books. And I'm not suggesting everyone go out there and watch Fight Club. It's an extremely violent, graphic movie, but what's beautiful about it is it depicts the internal struggle in all of us. And when Buddhism talks about, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, what the full equation, so to speak, is pain plus resistance equals suffering. So it's the resistance to our current situation that causes our anguish. And that's great, because that's something we can do about. That's something when we feel ourselves white knuckling through something, when we feel ourselves resisting what is, that's what causes the suffering. And when we loosen our grip. And that's really what Fight Club was about, was, the two voices within us who are fighting with one another. In the book and the movie, it literally depicted them as two different people beating each other up, which is often exactly what it feels like. So it's about making peace with both of them. We've been raised with cartoons showing an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. And it's not about destroying the devil, if you want to personify it as like the ego, or the angel within as the divinity within, as we say with Namaste, the divinity within me acknowledges that within you. But there's also, the ego in me acknowledges the ego in you. Like, we both have these two forces. And sometimes, yes, I slip and I do what the ego says. And sometimes I stick to what the divinity within me says. And when someone does something that I think is horrific or whatnot, instead of demonizing them, is realizing this probably came from their ego, from greed, from selfishness. And I understand where that comes from, because that is also within me. It's so nice with yoga and meditation to just focus on, the divinity within me. But that makes us more challenged to understand, the other side of us. And it's just like in the cover of the book, half of me is in the darkness, half of me is in the light. And it's about kind of being at peace with both of them and making friends with both of them. And it's this beautiful journey that's continuous.
For sure. Yeah. That's something I was thinking about today, because I was giving a lot of thought to speaking with you today and asking you some questions and whatnot. And part of the internal conversation I had was from Neil Donald Walsh, is we have 3 parts, right? Physical, mental, spiritual, or energetic, whatever you want to call it. And most people will work on 1 or 2 of those facets every day. Most people, maybe they exercise every day to make sure the physical is up and running. Maybe they eat right also to make sure that the physical is up and running. Maybe they do something to stimulate their mental side. But how much time do we spend in contemplation? How much time do we think about what we're thinking about? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to also consider that we're consuming things, when you say someone focuses on their health and what they're eating, it's like, well, we're consuming with our eyes and our ears. So we may be eating a very healthy meal, but while we're eating it, we're watching, either the news or something else that's horrific, that's filling us with fear and paranoia. And then, we are what we eat. And so I think, this idea of mindfulness is not just about being mindful about how we act in the world, and there's all these techniques about choosing what we speak, and is what we're about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now?
Right.
But what about, what we're consuming? How do we apply filters into going, is this beneficial or detrimental to my well-being? Not just my health or my, physical, mental, but and just kind of apply that filter. And I think if we don't honor ourselves, and I mean all of ourselves, like all the experiences that have occurred in our lives, if we hate or are resentful towards anything that happened in our past, then we are not fully embracing who we are, because there's still a part of us that hates or regrets or anything.
Right.
We're carrying all this stuff with us. And that's, when I say get rid of stuff and live a simple life, it's not just about getting rid of the extra clothes or the extra bed sheets or the extra bottles of shampoo around your tub. Those things aren't inherently detrimental, but getting rid of them is absolutely beneficial because you're exercising that muscle of letting go. And when you let go of the tangible stuff, it becomes a lot easier to let go of old fears and paranoias and prejudices that we didn't even know we had, and resentments and all of this stuff that weighs us down. And man, it feels really good to let that go.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Now, earlier you were saying so part of the process for you, and we'll just use you as a model. It works, so we'll just follow that path, right? And it worked for other people. You followed their path. Success has a path. Just follow it. So the first thing that got you started was thinking about what you're thinking about, or thinking about what success meant, or trying to get a new perspective on things. Part of that process, if I'm not mistaken, is meditation, or learning to sit and be quiet. Is that correct?
Yes, in the sense that meditation, many people ask me, how to do it, or they feel like they're doing it wrong, which is strictly because someone at some point told them there's a right way to do it. And then
that's my next question is, so what is meditation and what is not meditation?
Well, it's, I've read those books that say you have to sit a certain way and you have to have your eyes at a 45-degree angle and breathe out of one nostril and out the other and count breaths and all that. And it's just like, no wonder people are like, I can't do this. This is impossible. And the intention is to kind of get acquainted, like you said, with your own thoughts and your own mind. And I equate it in the book to taking a puppy out for a walk. And with the first time you take the puppy out for a walk, it chases after everything that piques its curiosity. Right. It'll just run all over the place. And of course, it's curious. It's all very interesting. What's that smell? What's that smell? And who's over there? And oh my gosh, there's another dog. And it's all over the place. And you trying to walk the dog are just being pulled in 100 different directions. But after some training, you can train the dog to stay by your side, to stop when it comes to the crosswalk, to pause, to smell something but not run after it, to see something but not react to it. And our mind is very much like that, except we've never taken the time to train it. We've never put a leash on it.
Right.
And it doesn't mean restrictive, and it doesn't mean, locking it down and being angry with it when it misbehaves. There are times when you literally take the leash off your mind and let it run around in the dog park, so to speak.
Right.
You just allow it to just explore. But the important thing is that when you call it to come back, it comes right back and it knows its place. And if meditation for you is when you go jogging and you're jogging and all you're thinking about is your breath and the next step and the next step, and you're not worried about what to have for dinner or the laundry or your to-do list or you're just running. And I'll worry about that stuff when, I hit that 5-mile mark or whatever. Or if you're doing yoga and you're like, for the next hour, I'm going to leave all my concerns outside with my shoes, and they're just, they're going to wait for me out there. And for the next hour, I'm just going to focus on my pose. I'm not going to be concerned with what the person to my right is doing or what the person to my left is doing. I'm just going to be here. And if during that hour you stay focused and that's what you're focusing on, running, gardening, yoga, whatever it is you're doing where your mind stays focused on one thing and one thing only, that's meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And even if your mind starts chasing after something, you're in the middle of child's pose, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what, pizza sounds really good. You know, and that's fine if you catch yourself and go, all right, we'll consider that after, but come back to child's pose right now. Come back to this. That act of catching yourself and bringing it back, that's successful meditation.
Right.
Many people confuse a successful meditation is if your mind doesn't wander. Good luck
Correct.
with that.
Yeah.
You know, it's, perhaps even more so, the more it wanders and the more you bring it back, the more successful the meditation is, because
you're developing a muscle. It's like
absolutely.
It's like doing repetitions. I may be oversimplifying it, but I try to explain to people, at least for me, meditation is being fully, completely aware. Because a lot of folks, like you said, people think meditation is like you flip a switch and everything stops. Like there's nothing. It's a void. But I try to explain, I believe meditation is being fully aware, but just not giving a hoot. You're aware of the noises outside, but you don't have to necessarily get dragged into the noises outside. Or you're aware that you want pizza, but you don't have to go down that pizza vortex at that moment. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And in that, when we, like you said, when you hear the noise outside, we tend to judge it. And when we start using adjectives to go, well, that's annoying, or why don't they silence that, or whatever, that's when we step away from what nonviolent communication distinguishes between observation and judgment, is when we start using adjectives to compare the current situation to how we think in our minds it quote unquote should be. And in the sense of meditation is the dropping the shoulds. And because we are so knee-jerk reaction to put a label to everything, I found for myself that instead of trying to just not label it at all, I just decided to label everything as interesting. You know, because it's such a neutral thing, like, oh, that's interesting. You know, whatever it is, whether it's, you know, my neighbors are celebrating a big birthday party and I'm being inclined, well, that's so much fun and that's fantastic and that's great. And oh my gosh, that barbecue smells so good. And I was like, that's interesting. And if an airplane crashes, well, that's interesting. And and then I'm able to look at it kind of without the over dramatization and without putting my interpretation of the situation onto it, you know, projecting rather than just observing. And it's been a really interesting process. You know, I talk in both books about that, distinguishing between a feeling and an emotion. And the big difference between a feeling and emotion is the narrative that we create around what's happening. We feel anger, but the emotion is this shouldn't be happening, and we run with that. We create an entire narrative around it, and just feel it and move on to the next feeling. That don't get stuck. I don't know if that made any sense, but
oh yeah, it's
okay.
What's happening is merely what's happening. It's just it's what we make of it, right? It's sort of cliche. It's like what is it? You can't change the wind, but you can change the position of your sail, something along those lines. It's cliche, but I believe it's true, right? So like you said, there's a party next door. Interesting. They're not deliberately having a party specifically to disrupt your Saturday afternoon to make you miserable, right? They're just having a party because they're celebrating someone's birthday or an anniversary.
Yeah. And even that part of you. So and interesting that you took that there, because the moment you think, well, they're annoying me, and you're thinking, well, they're not doing this to annoy me. What I would look at is, what is this pattern I have of thinking everything about me? You know, that because again, the way we do one thing is the way we do all things. So we're going to see when somebody cuts us off on the road, well, they're being a jerk to me. It's like, this had nothing to do with you. Right. You know, and when you start reminding yourself of that, it's so liberating, because then we don't have our guard up. We're not so reactionary to everything. We just allow them to have their party and allow that driver to go faster than we are. And we just allow instead of resist. And that's where the liberation is. I sense a hashtag in there somewhere.
Hashtag allow.
Taken out of context, that could be a really bad thing, you know,
Well,
because
that's true.
with Buddhism, a lot of times we are taught to be tolerant and accepting, but I think it's really important to remember that tolerance does not mean accepting what is harmful.
Right.
And so boundaries are important, you know, drawing that line and saying, you know, where do I draw that line? And acknowledging someone may draw that line somewhere else. And if we don't communicate where our lines are and someone crosses them, we can't be upset with them for doing something they didn't, you know what I mean? Like for putting the blame on them. And so it's really up to us to be really clear. And again, if we don't define those lines for ourselves, what is enough? What is success? What is happiness? We'll never know. Even if we're staring right at it, we'll never know. And we don't know what our limitations are. And so we go past them all the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I think it could be dangerous to hashtag or to encapsulate because again, everything taken out of context can mean a gazillion different things.
That's correct. Okay. I withdraw the hashtag.
No. That was a really great point because I thought about it and I'm like, yes, you know, that's awesome. Just like, let's just allow. And I've had people show me, they've gotten a tattoo that says allow. It's like, well, to what point, you know? Like,
yes.
And that's why the first principle in Buddhist Boot Camp is that the opposite of what you know is also true. It acknowledges that to someone else, somewhere else, because of their time, place, and circumstance, the opposite of your truth is their truth. And we have to honor that their truth is just as real to them as yours is to you. And any impulse we have to argue with them, yell at them, call them names, demonize them is this attempt for us to feel superior by making them inferior, to feel right by making someone else wrong. And again, and that's a pattern. I don't think we need to do it stems from this lack of self-confidence. You know, if I'm so confident in my views, I don't need to belittle someone else's in order to feel good about mine. In the book, I take it to an extreme. You know, if somebody tells me that the sky is green and I believe it to be blue, I don't need to argue with them. I don't need to show them proof that they are wrong. I don't need to get 10 other people on my side. I just walk away from that conversation with this newfound knowledge that to some people, the sky looks green. I'm able to do that peacefully because the blueness of my sky is not at all jeopardized by how green someone else perceives it to be.
Gotcha.
How much easier would life be if we just did that? If we just let go of that need to prove ourselves to, and a lot of it, again, the more we approve of our own choices in life, the less we need other people to validate them. But that in itself is a pattern, you know,
right?
You constantly need validation from others. Is there a lack of self-confidence? And being aware of them, like you said, it's a pattern. We create a new one. And it feels really good when you start walking your own path. And there are people in your life who encourage you to do that. And there are people in your life who are going to hate you for doing that. And that's, what's that quote I read the other day? You know, there are haters everywhere. Some will see you walk on water and say it's because you can't swim.
Right.
You know, so just keep walking. Just do what you're going to do. And I appreciate all the feedback because it says more about other people than it does about me. And it helps me understand the world better. And that helps me kind of navigate around it more easily, if that makes sense.
For sure. Now, I suppose if someone were interested in resetting patterns and whatnot, the first step, I would guess, is they have to want to do that. So if they've established the fact they want to do it, what's the next step? Like, what do they do? How do they get started?
It's interesting because I think simultaneously, it's not about, I want to create a new path. It's, I want to stop following the path I'm currently following.
Okay.
Because I hear from so many people who have so much stress in their lives and they're like, I want to do things that will bring me peace. And they're like, okay, well, to that stress and that for the four jobs that I have and the 3 children and all that, I'm going to add yoga. I'm going to add meditation. I'm going to go on a retreat. I'm going to start. They're adding more to already an overcrowded plate. So I think simultaneously, instead of saying, I want to bring, more peaceful actions to my life, simultaneously, we need to go, well, what can I take out? And many people, that's where they have a hard time because they don't want to give up anything. And that's why I never feel any of the changes I made in my life have been a sacrifice so much as they've been an exchange. It's kind of been an upgrade. Like I gave up the fried food, but I didn't give it up. I exchanged it for feeling good all the time,
Excellent. Yeah.
and so swapping out instead of adding, just going, okay, what can I swap out? And sometimes when there's too much, it's kind of like when you're trying to purge your wardrobe. It's not about getting rid of one shirt and getting a new one. It's every time you get a new one, you get rid of two,
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost happens simultaneously in the sense, like, it's like, you want to eat healthier. Okay, well, you're going to eliminate fried foods and you're going to eliminate fast food. And so you're going to take on this new intention of eating healthy, but simultaneously you're going to get rid of all the other bad habits, the midnight snacking or whatever you've got going on. And it's just, so I don't know if that answers your question, but simultaneously, it's not so much about thinking, what do I want to do? What do I want to stop doing?
Okay.
Like, what am I currently doing that's detrimental to the goal I want to achieve or the life I want to lead? Stop doing that first. Before you even start doing anything extra, stop doing the very thing that's detrimental to you. That will offer, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. And that's where the introspection comes in, because sometimes people are so knee deep in the hoopla, they don't even know what's detrimental, right? Because they've been eating the fast food for so long and that's become normal. They've been overbooking themselves and overcommitting themselves. So that's normal. Everything seems normal. It's hard to understand what to get rid of because it's all normal. Does that make sense?
It does. And perhaps that's where those filters come in of, it is what I'm about to eat healthy. Is it kind? And just setting those intentions, and then and is the movie I'm about to watch, is that going to instill more fear and paranoia in me? Is that going to fuel that flame of violence in me and reactionary, or is it going to actually teach me something and help me grow? And if what am I going to eat, is it kind, not just to other beings on this planet, is it kind to me? Is this, and it stems for me from, again, going back to this namaste concept of the God within me acknowledges the God within you. When you're eating, you're feeding the God within you. So if God came over for dinner tonight, what would you serve? That changed my thinking drastically, because I was like, well, I wouldn't serve God this, and I certainly wouldn't serve it to God, asking him to stand over the kitchen sink. I would actually set the table. I would actually take a moment and just sit there and enjoy my meal. And I would create this ambiance of relaxation and all that. It's like, well, if we would do it for others, and we often do it for others, why don't we do it for ourselves? And I think it's because we don't acknowledge the divinity within us. So we allow people to treat us terribly. We treat ourselves terribly. If someone else spoke to us the way we talk to ourselves, we would not tolerate it. Right. So again, bringing that awareness, catching, it's like, why am I talking to myself like that? Like, I love this person. Don't talk to him about him like that. So bringing that awareness and creating a new pattern, again, just like in meditation, catching yourself when you're doing it and bringing it back, training that puppy and being gentle with yourself. That puppy, it doesn't know anything else. You've never trained it to do anything else. Your mind doesn't know, like, hey, we're going to create a new pattern here. But it doesn't take long, just like with exercise. After a couple of weeks, it becomes a habit. And after, 2 months, it becomes a lifestyle or something like that?
It depends on the latest research, right? It used to be 21 consecutive days. Now it's supposed to be 12 weeks. But the idea is clear. Consistent daily chipping away will do more for you than trying to do,
and without any
heavy
attachment
day
to, I'm going to be perfect at this a month from now.
Right.
10 years later, 10 years later, you'll still be meditating and catching that puppy.
Yeah.
When certain smells come up, that puppy's going to be like, oh, that's a new one, and I appreciate all those opportunities. They offer me a chance. I'll be really honest, my spiritual journey has been from the rigid to the gentle. And so I roll around and I'm like, everything is good. And then all of a sudden I bump up against this kind of rigid, sharp edge. And it's so tempting to kind of shy away from it, run away from it, avoid the thing that, showed me that rough corner. But now I always keep an eye out to go, where are there sharp edges? Because that's just an indication, like, hey, that's where you need to file it down a little bit more. And that's then awesome. It just becomes, so that's the practice. Just And a process of elimination, just like with the job, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew what I didn't want to do. And I think that's an equally helpful navigation tool. Figure out what you don't want instead of, I want this, I want this, we want a ton of things. Well, what do you not want? And then you realize you're doing a lot of those things. So many people are busy by choice and they're complaining about it. It's like, well, you created your own schedule.
Right.
Right. This is on you.
Right.
And they go, well, no, it's not. I have to do this. And my sister the other day, I had a conversation with her and she's like, well, I have to pick up my daughter from gymnastics. I have to take my son to soccer. I have to cook dinner for my husband. I was like, stop. Is this not the life you've always dreamed of, including the children and the husband and the cooking and the family time? She's like, yeah. I'm like, well, you're missing out on it because you're complaining every day that you quote unquote have to do it instead of saying, I choose to do this and I enjoy it. So changing our language from identifying as victims and saying, I have to do this and poor me and you're making me feel this, to I'm choosing this.
Right.
That empowers you to go, well, I can choose something else.
That came from, I'm sure one of many sources, but that came from Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Influential People. Did you ever read that book?
I haven't, no.
Well, one of them is, I might be paraphrasing, but it's assuming responsibility and assuming personal responsibility. And it's exactly that. It's, I choose to go to these meetings. I'm choosing to eat this for lunch. I'm choosing. And so what happens, as I'm just repeating what you said, is you start to realize I'm making choices here. I'm choosing to be busy for the sake of being busy, which is eating up all my time and keeping me from being creative or keeping me from doing other stuff.
Yeah. Or from just not doing anything. I mean, right. There's such a culture of, well, what are you going to do if you're not doing anything? I'm like, I'm going to do nothing and I'm going to be really good at it.
Right.
And very few of us are good at doing nothing, and so I tell people, if you are a list maker and you make a list of things to do today, add to that list, do nothing, set a timer, and for 20 minutes, do nothing. And it's going to feel very weird at first, but after a while, you're going to crave it. You're going to crave it as much as people crave a cup of coffee in the morning and be like, I just need 20 minutes during which I do absolutely nothing. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not texting. I'm not on social media. I'm just sitting here. And that becomes this little vacation that you take, this little retreat that you go on, that, going back to where we started, you don't need to sell everything you own and move to Nepal. You can just turn off your cell phone and just sit. And it's funny to me when people tell me, oh, I went on this hike and I found this really beautiful spot to meditate, and they're like, you should go there, and I'm like, the places I go when I close my eyes to meditate, I'm sure are way more beautiful than anything we can find. Or I revisit places I have been to, so the moment I close my eyes on that cushion, I'm either right back at the monastery, or I'm right back by that waterfall. And I don't need to leave my house to get there. If that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The brain doesn't know the difference. I mean, that's scientifically proven.
Exactly. And that's what was so beautiful about this exercise we did, at a guided meditation exercise, where we were asked to think back to the saddest moment in our lives. And, everyone started, visualizing it. And for over the course of a few minutes, we visualized it. We took ourselves back to who was with us, what we were wearing, what, all the sounds, textures, smells. And people started crying as if they were going through that experience all over again. Then we were asked to think back of the happiest moment in our lives, and people started giggling to themselves and their posture straightened up. And like you said, the brain doesn't know the difference. The body, it's as if they were going through that experience all over again. And the power behind that exercise for me is that we were in complete control of how we felt. We could make ourselves sad, we could make ourselves happy. Yes. It was Carlos Castaneda who said, you can make yourself happy, you can make yourself miserable. The amount of work is the same.
Correct.
So it comes back to choosing. Like, I'm miserable. Well, why am I choosing that?
Exactly.
There are other things on the menu I can choose than misery. But I've always chosen misery. Okay, but how did that work out for you? So I've always chosen to complain. I even challenge people sometimes. 5:00 in the morning, I'll post online, your challenge for today is to go all day without complaining. 5:00 in the morning, people are always like, oh, too late. It's just, but that's beautiful, because then you catch yourself in your pattern of complaining or judging or whatever is detrimental to your own peace.
That's awesome. So So far.
I know it's a lot.
You know, it's fine. It's fine. It's great. And maybe it's not like really a simple, pragmatic way to do things, but that's just how my brain works. First, we got to decide. First, we have to understand we don't have to give up everything. Like, in order to experience peace, in order to experience stillness, we don't necessarily have to give up everything and go move it to the Himalayan mountains. We don't have to do that. But the things that will help us along the way, very simple things, put our thoughts and our actions through just some very simple filters. Is this helping me as a human entity? Not necessarily is it helping me aesthetically, or is it helping me, I don't know, any other way, but this is helping. Can I get rid of this? Can I exchange this for something else? So can I exchange my time binge watching a show? Can I exchange that time with maybe
reading a book or doing nothing?
Watching a positive show, or assuming that the binge watch is negative, but maybe I can exchange it by watching something positive. Or can I sit for 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Now, does journaling play a part of this? Like, does the actual physical act of writing things down and observations like help solidify anything?
I believe so, in the sense that, when I give my talks, I often, quote Gandhi's invitation that happiness is when what we think, what we say, and what we do are all in alignment. And how can our actions be in alignment with our values if we're not really clear about what our values are? And I gave a talk in, I believe it was Florida, and this woman said, well, I don't know what my core values are. Can you give them to me? And I said, absolutely not. But what I can do is ask you a whole lot of questions. And at the end of that, you will have a clearer idea of the kind of person you want to lead and the kind of life you want to have. And that generated this monthly journal that I'm still working on. It's called Mana'o, which is the Hawaiian word for contemplation and meditation. And every month it asks you to journal, and every day has a different set of questions. And, January was all about letting go. February was about love. March was about moving forward. April was about clarity. May was about Buddhism. And it asks you these questions that really, it may seem like it's a tiny little book, and it's just daily questions, and it may seem really simple, but if you really sit with it, it's a lot of hard work. It makes you contemplate answers to questions you never asked yourself before, and you get to know yourself better. I've heard from sometimes for the first time. And that's a big difference between, in acknowledging what do I believe versus what was I told. And that's a big step in our personal evolution, I think, and growth, is discovering the difference between who we are and who we are told to be. If that makes sense.
That makes huge sense. And that's a tough one, probably because just of our 67,000-year-old brain. As cave dwellers, we had to act a certain way and look a certain way in order to be included into a group, so we wouldn't be left out or clubbed to death, to be left out of a genetic, a gene pool to perpetuate as the species move forward. But that was 67,000 years ago, right?
Exactly. We don't need to worry about that.
Not so much anymore, unless you're trying to acquire a certain amount of likes and shares, right?
Yeah, and then you're trying to fit into a mold that someone else made for you, and you're trying to behave a certain way that may not be authentic with who you are. It may just be in line with who people think you, quote unquote, should be.
Right.
I think, in my experience, people have always told me, you're so brave for being so honest and transparent. And I don't necessarily think it's a courageous act to be vulnerable necessarily, because in my experience, no one has ever, clubbed me to death for it or whatnot. I mean, YouTubers are going to have their way with their comments, mind you, but the most common response to my transparency has not been judgment. It's been a relatability. There are more people out there being challenged by the exact same thing. Alanis Morissette said, "We're all battling similar demons, not coincidentally."
Right.
And I agree. It's not a coincidence that we're all battling similar demons. It's just we're battling them so we can help each other out. But how can we, if we're all being so secretive about them? We share on a social media the highlight reel of our lives instead of talking about real stuff. So how can anyone possibly relate to us if we're pretending that everything is hunky-dory, so to speak? So I just share it all. The good, the bad, and the horrific. I just put it all out there. And more often than not, people are like, oh my gosh, do we have the same mother? Or do we have this?
Right.
Yeah, we're all challenged by this. And these teachers appear in our lives in different ways. But we all have so many tools around us to help us grow. It's just, like you said when we first started, you have to want to grow. And many people are not ready. And it's very detrimental to try to push someone to want something as badly for themselves as you want it for them.
Yeah.
You have to want it. That's why we do so much work with recovery, so much work with PTSD, is you can't help someone who's not ready to help themselves. And oftentimes for very good reason. I mean, with PTSD, for example, we can't help someone heal if their identity is wrapped up in being someone with PTSD, and you're telling them there's life beyond the pain. You're threatening their very identity. They're like, who am I going to be if you take that away from me? So they will defend, they will protect, they will fight for that identity more than that energy can be used to heal. And you can't force them. You just go, when you're ready, I'm here. And that could be any of the labels that we get attached to.
Did you ever read George Leonard's book, Mastery?
I have not.
It's an interesting read. He was, I believe he was in his 50s when he took up the martial art of Aikido. And he eventually worked his way up to black belt. And as part of the process, he realized that there were certain steps it took to achieve mastery. And one of the ideas he talks about is homeostasis, I beg your pardon. And this is your body at all levels is just trying to keep things the same. And so we meet resistance no matter what we're trying to do. If you're trying to lose weight, you will be met with resistance because your body is trying to keep everything normal. So if it was normal to eat fast food, and if it was normal to be sedentary, now you're trying to change it. It's a defense mechanism for what your body perceives as its well-being. So I wonder if that plays a little piece of change in general, whether it's PTSD or weight loss or
anything. I think where I change the narrative in change, I seek change. Like what I resist is that homeostasis, like that stagnation. That scares me more than the unknown. And that has become a pattern, is like, oh, I know what's to the right, but I don't know what's to the left. And most people will go to the right because what's there. So I've made it a habit to just seek what is changed, to approach and proceed with curiosity, not caution. We always proceed with caution. Like,
right.
No, that means you're afraid. That means you're scared. That means you're shelled up. I've survived. I'm assuming everyone listened has survived 100% of everything that's happened in their lives. So, my track record's 100%. Exactly. And if my track record's 100%, if I was taking a bet in Vegas on whether someone's going to make it through what comes next, I will put all my money on them making it through it, because they've made it through everything else. So proceed with curiosity, not caution, not fear, not paranoia, not resistance. And again, it's that pattern, and just creating a pattern of, I always put on my right shoe first. I'm going to put on my left one. Not because there's anything wrong with putting on your right shoe first,
right?
But because there's something so beneficial from changing things up, because life itself will change things up. And if you've made it a pattern to be okay with change, you'll be okay with the wrinkles when they start to show, with the hair loss, with the gray hair, with wherever it is, you'll approach it with the same level of curiosity and acceptance. Whereas if you've made it a habit to try to keep everything the same, then you're going to do the plastic surgery, you're going to do the hair dye, you're going to do everything to try to resist what is happening. And I can only imagine how difficult it would be to take that last breath if you've clung to everything in your life. I saw a quote that said, everything I've ever let go of had claw marks in it, because we tend to just cling so tightly, not just hold it loosely, hold it lightly and allow. I think it was Papa G who said, what comes, let it come, what stays, let it stay, and
Mhm.
what goes, let it go. And if that becomes the new pattern, everything becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. I think of the Zen proverb, let go or be dragged down.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's one that just kind of circulates in my brain. Sometimes it's like, why am I holding on to whatever this is? Why am I
And a
holding
lot
on
of
to
times
this?
it's because it may hurt to let go, but when we acknowledge that there's
Why
more
does it
pain
hurt
in
to let
hanging
go?
on,
Yeah. It's
or
like,
or choosing the less of the two, it hurts to let go, but it hurts to hang on. Well, choose the one that hurts less.
right.
It people say, oh, it's easier said than done, whatever it is, like changing patterns or not getting angry anymore or allowing whatever hashtag you want to come up with. It's easier said than done. And I said, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is spending the rest of our lives angry, reactive,
hmm
blaming other people for everything, blaming situations, trying to duck and dive around boulders that don't exist. And it just, that's the alternative. And I said, yeah, this may be, sound easier said than done, but the alternative is way harder. So
Yeah.
I'd rather spend the next 20 years of my life enjoying my time here than being afraid of what may happen tomorrow,
Awesome.
personally.
So with that, as we wrap this up, and believe me, I could sit here and speak with you for 3 days straight. This stuff is super interesting for me, and I really appreciate you spending time and speaking with me and sharing this stuff with our audience. Do you have any like last thoughts or parting words as we bring this to an end?
I think being really clear of what our intentions are, of, where we ourselves are taking us away from where we want to be, so to speak. That's, if you're going to contemplate anything, companies, organizations, churches, yoga studios, all these places have core values. They have a vision statement, a mission statement. You go to their website and you see what it is they're dedicated to and how they make their decisions. And when we hold them accountable for it, we say, you're an environmental company, how are you doing this at the time? It's like,
Mhm.
no problem with you doing it, but don't do it and say that's not, you know what I mean? Like, just,
Right.
we want congruence. And so we expect this of others. I think we ourselves have not done ourselves the service of saying, what are my core values? What is my vision statement? And, how can I hold myself accountable that what I think, what I say, and what I do is all in alignment? Because the moment it's not in alignment, I'm creating conflict within me.
hmm
I'm thinking one thing, saying another, and believing a third. And again, Fight Club, I'm beating myself up. And how can I be at peace with the world if I'm not even at peace with myself? So, as parting words, so to speak, is write down your core values, write down a paragraph describing the kind of life you want to lead, cross reference it with the life you're leading, and you'll see where you have some work to do.
That's awesome.
That's, yeah, that's all I got to say is, you know, be, do that.
Okay, let's start there.
Yeah.
And so I know your books are available on Amazon.com. What are some other websites or resources
Well,
you
they're
want to direct
available
folks to?
everywhere.
Okay.
The books are at all the bookstores. If people get the books directly from me, from BuddhistBootCamp.com, they're only $10, and every time you get it, another copy is donated to the Prison Library Project.
Okay.
Whereas there's no way for us to track that on Amazon. I'm grateful for Amazon. They make the book available in countries that don't have bookstores or whatnot. But if there is one, an independent bookstore in your neighborhood, support them, or if you want to get it from my site, so we support the Prison Library Project, do that. My only request is that when you're done with the book, pass it on to someone else. My hope is that every copy is read by at least 4 people. Just keep passing it on. It doesn't do any good sitting on a shelf
Right.
somewhere. And the 2 books are similar in message, but very different in style. In Buddhist Boot Camp, every chapter is only a page long, and you can read them in any order. So it's just a collection of 8 years worth of journal entries and letters to friends, so people can just pick it up and read one chapter, and if it resonates, great. If not, move on to the next one. Where Faithfully Religionless is kind of answering all the questions people had after they read the first one. They wanted to know the narrative, the story, like, how did you end up where you are? And I had a really great time recording the audio version of that one. So if anybody does Audible, or if you are sitting in the car for 2 hours a day on the way to work or whatnot, get the Audible version. I think it's only $4, and it's me narrating it. You can shut me up anytime by pressing a button. It's a wonderful way. Since like with the Buddhist Boot Camp podcast, every episode is only 5 minutes long, but it gives you just enough food for thought to contemplate some of the stuff that we were talking about, and without overwhelming us, because that's the thing with some of these books and whatnot, is they're just so overwhelming. They're filled with such great stuff, but we can't. We're there's too much. So I try to just offer it in a way that's bite-sized, that's digestible, and applicable more than anything, because the last thing I want to be is inspirational, which is just a form of entertainment. I'd like to motivate people to actually apply some of these lessons into their daily lives. So I appreciate what you're doing, from the podcast to the yoga studio, for using the book in your practice and encouraging people to step onto the mat to get to know themselves, and then step off the mat to bring their true selves into the world. So thank you so much for the work you do.
And thank you for that.